I was 26 the first time I flew out to a drilling platform in the Gulf of Mexico. From the chopper it looked like a small city welded onto legs, a hard-edged island dropped in the middle of a restless, black-green ocean. I'd studied petrochemical engineering, passed every safety course, memorized manuals as thick as cinder blocks. None of that prepared me for how the rig felt underfoot, steel that hummed like a living thing, wind that carried the taste of salt and metal. On my first night, one of the electricians, a quiet guy named Luis with hands like vices, gave me a piece of advice I didn't find in any handbook. "Night rule," he said, tapping his ear protection. "If you hear knocks, scraping, or whispering, don't chase it. If it matters, it'll still be there in the morning." Everyone at the table nodded like he just said, "Wear your harness." I laughed, because what else do you do when grown men talk about whispers at sea? They didn't laugh back. Life on the rig trains you to measure everything. PSI, volts, flow rates, your steps on ladder rungs. I joined the night shift a week in, shadowing senior techs through graded catwalks that looked down into a throat of dark water. Out there, hours stretch. The sea is never quiet, only layered, fans, pumps, the low animal rumble of generators, and beneath it all the slap of waves against pillars the size of redwoods. The first time I heard it, I thought a valve had blown. One clean, concussive hit. Bang, so deep it ran through the floors into my bones. I froze and put a hand to the railing. The steel hummed. No alarm strobes, no pressure spike. My radio stayed calm, crackle, jokes, routine callouts. When I asked the galley guy if he'd felt anything, he looked up from his grill like I'd asked if it was raining inside. "Nope," he said, flipping a burger. "You knew?" I told myself it was nothing, a stray resonance, a drop tool 6 levels up, that I'd learned to separate signal from noise the way everyone does. Except a second night brought a second hit. Louder. Closer. Bang. Then another. Bang. Each strike seemed to echo along the spine of the rig and die in the space below the main deck, where the service levels sit like floors in a sunken parking garage. I thought about Luis's rule. I thought about being the guy who runs to find a ghost and ends up in a report. I didn't go. Not that night. The third night, I was alone on inspection when the knocks started stringing together. Irregular at first, then steady, like someone swinging a heavy bar into a railing on a count only they knew. Bang. 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 Adrenaline can turn courage into arrogance. I unclipped the chain across the service stairs, temporarily out of service stenciled in red, and started down. Instantly the temperature dropped 5 degrees. The light thinned into islands. The air smelled like wet iron and old batteries. Down there, away from the main deck, you hear the ocean breathing under the machinery. The catwalk grating trembled under my boots as a swell rolled through the legs. I kept my left hand on the pipe rail, my right on the flashlight, telling myself slow is smooth and smooth is safe. OSHA would have killed me if they'd seen it, but I kept going. Halfway down the first run I realized the knocking had moved. Not away, below. Whatever was making the sound was under me now, somewhere around the second service deck that sits just above the splash zone. That close to the water, the ocean starts to feel less like scenery and more like a crowd pressing its face to the glass. At the second landing a chain blocked another stairwell, authorized personnel only. My name badge said I was authorized. My heartbeat said I wasn't. I ducked anyway and dropped to the lower level. My flashlight cut a cone across pipelines and cable trays, past a bundled hose coiled like a sleeping python. The knocks were louder here, sharp enough to wake an animal instinct I didn't know I had. I swung the beam left, then right, and every time it hit open space the gulf loomed up behind it, black, heaving, endless. That's when I saw the bar. A length of steel hung from a freight cable, probably jostled loose in the last maintenance cycle. Every surge of wind sent it out then back, clang into a safety rail with the exact dead certainty of all the knocks I'd heard. I laughed out loud, relief so big it made my knees weak. The world snapped back from myth to mechanics in an instant. I stepped closer, reached to still it, and the whole rig answered with a new sound. Not a knock. A strike. Like a sledgehammer putting its full weight into the base of the nearest leg. The deck jumped. My flashlight skittered off my palm, pinwheeled across the grating, and wedged against the girder. For one blind second I saw nothing, felt nothing but the sway of the platform and the rush of my own breath. By the time I snatched the light, the beam swung in a stuttering arc and caught a shape where no shape should be. Not a person. Not a piece of equipment. A piece of darkness darker than the dark around it, clinging to the column like a stain, tall as two men and narrow as a knife. It didn't move so much as recede, as if the light gave it depth and then took it away. The wind came through the ribs of the rig with a low moan and the shape melted into it, doing a thing my brain insisted shadows could not do. It slid into open air. I don't remember the first 30 steps I ran. I remember the taste of battery acid at the back of my throat, the way the chain I ducked swung against my hip, and how the radio crushed against my chest harness like it wanted out. I hit the main deck with my lungs on fire and almost plowed into Luis. He grabbed my shoulders before I could crash into the bulkhead. "Hey," he said, voice flat. "Look at me." There's someone." I managed. "No." He squeezed hard. "There isn't. You're done down there tonight." I slept in the infirmary on a cot that felt like a raft. The medic called it a panic episode, wrote notes, checked vitals, asked questions I didn't want to answer. Had I been sleeping enough? Drinking water? Hearing anything unusual? I told him about the loose bar and left the other part out, because once you say, "I saw a shadow let go of a pillar," you're not touching a toolbox again. In the morning I went back with Luis. Daylight made everything look smaller, kinder. We secured the bar, logged the hazard, double-checked the clamps and the cable anchor. It should have ended there. It did not. He stood at the edge of the landing, staring into the water for a beat too long. "You felt it hit," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah." He nodded like a man agreeing with bad weather. "Sometimes the legs flex. Currents. Swell frequency. You get sympathetic vibration. You can feel it in your teeth." He spat into the sea and watched the wind take it. "That's the part you can write up. And the other part?" He didn't look at me. "Night rule," he said. "If it's important, it'll be there in the morning." We never found anything else. No crack, no bruise on the column, no loose footing. Nothing to explain why the platform had thrown that sledgehammer sound into my chest. I kept working nights, but after that I never broke the chain across the service stairs again. When knocks came, because they did, every few weeks, like weather, I logged what I could measure and ignored the rest. Years later I still don't have a name for what I saw. Maybe stress turned a smear of oil into a silhouette. Maybe a wave caught me off balance, and my brain wrote a story to make the fall feel earned. Or maybe there are things that live in the skin between structure and sea, the places engineers draw and weld and believe we understand, because understanding helps us sleep. I don't think whatever I saw wanted me. It didn't reach. It didn't chase. It only reminded me where I was standing, on borrowed ground, over an ocean that doesn't care what you think is real. I still tell new hires the night rule. They laugh. I don't argue. I just make sure their lanyards are clipped, that they drink water, that somebody knows where they are when the shift thins out and the wind rises. And when the rig goes quiet enough that you can hear the pulse of it, steel breathing, legs flexing, the long throat of the Gulf clearing itself, I keep my feet under me, my hands on the rail, and I wait for morning. I never thought a fishing boat would change my life. I grew up in Jalisco, Mexico, but ended up in Washington State after chasing work. Aberdeen is a small, great port town with more gulls than people. I got my first job in a shipyard, scrubbing hulls and fixing paint. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me close to the sea. That's where I met Captain Samuel Miller. If you tried to picture a fisherman from an old novel, you'd see him. Tall, weathered, with a beard gone half white, and eyes so blue you'd swear they'd stolen color from the Pacific itself. He spoke only when necessary, but when he did, everyone listened. He had that kind of gravity. Through a mix of luck and persistence, I joined his crew on a long-haul trip. My first voyage at sea. The plan was simple: 3 weeks of fishing salmon in cold northern waters, then back to port with full holds. The crew was seasoned, men like Isaac and Leroy who had decades on me. They taught me knots, gear checks, the art of staying upright when the deck pitched like a carnival ride. What they didn't teach me was what happens after midnight. The first night, sleep was impossible. The bunks were narrow, strapped with belts so you wouldn't roll out when the boat rocked. The walls groaned. Waves slapped. I lay awake until something cut through it all, a voice. At first I thought I was dreaming. It was faint, melodic. A woman's voice, rising and falling with a rhythm older than language. It seeped through the metal walls like smoke through cracks. The kind of singing that makes your stomach knot without knowing why. I pressed my ear to the wall. The song was clearer there, soft, drawn-out notes that seemed to stretch across the waves. My chest tightened. Who was singing out here? There were no women aboard. I nudged Isaac, who snored on the bunk below. No reaction. I whispered his name, even shook the frame. Nothing. The voice went on for 15 endless minutes, then stopped. Silence fell heavy, and I lay staring into the dark, too wired to sleep. By morning, I convinced myself it was the captain listening to music. Old opera, maybe? Something harmless. The second night proved me wrong. Same hour, same voice. I held still, telling myself not to care, not to listen, but the sound wound itself into my bones. It wasn't just singing, it was calling. Every note pressed on me like a hand between my shoulder blades, urging me out of bed, up the stairs, onto the deck. I fought it until dawn. By the third night I was unraveling. When I joked to Leroy about the late-night opera, his face changed. He looked away, scrubbed a coil of rope like it was suddenly fascinating, and muttered, "If you hear her, ignore it." Ignore it? How? I asked Isaac the next day. He wouldn't meet my eyes either. "It won't hurt you. Just don't follow it," he said. His tone was final, like a parent telling a child not to touch a stove. That should have been enough. But 5 nights in, curiosity cracked me open. It was near 2 a.m. The sea was calmer than usual, the boat rocking gently like a cradle. When the voice began, sweeter and closer than ever, I couldn't stand it anymore. I pulled on a jacket, slipped past sleeping bodies, and climbed toward the deck. The door creaked open. Cold air slapped me. The stars were faint behind rolling mist. The voice flowed across the deck like a ribbon of silver, leading me aft, toward the stern. I walked as if pulled on a leash. Halfway there, reality hit. If I slipped, no one would know. A single wave could sweep me into black water colder than ice. I hesitated, heart pounding. The voice grew louder. I pressed on. At the stern rail, I stopped. The singing was right there, on the other side of the barrier. I leaned forward, expecting to see someone, a stowaway, a prankster, anything. Instead, I saw mist curling over the waves, and in that mist, a figure. It was faint, almost transparent. The outline of a woman drifting just above the surface, hair streaming like kelp, mouth open in song. She turned, or maybe the mist shifted, and in that instant she looked at me. Not with eyes, but with presence. My whole chest seized, like I'd been hooked from the inside. Then she vanished. The silence afterward was unbearable. No engine hum, no creak of wood, no sea spray. Just emptiness. I stumbled back to the bunks, shaking. Isaac was awake this time, waiting with a glare sharp enough to cut steel. He dragged me into a corner and hissed, "Don't ever do that again. If she wanted you, you'd be gone. Understand?" He didn't explain further. None of them ever did. Later, when I worked up the courage to ask the captain himself, Samuel only smiled, a slow, almost nostalgic smile. "She's an old friend," he said. Nothing more. The crew calls her many things, a ghost, a siren, a blessing. They don't argue about what she is, only about whether she sings for good or ill. Some men believe she keeps the boat safe. Others say she's waiting for someone reckless enough to step past the rail. All I know is this: the singing never stopped. Every trip, every voyage, every time I bunk down on that boat, she returns. I've learned to lie still, to keep my breathing even, to let her song wash over me without answering. But part of me remembers that night on the stern, when I nearly leaned just a little too far. And part of me wonders what would have happened if I had. The first time I saw it, I thought I was imagining things. We were 3 days into a supply run off the coast of Alaska, hauling spare parts and crates of canned food to a research station perched on an island no bigger than a football field. The weather was clear, the sea unusually calm, and I'd drawn the graveyard watch, midnight to 4. Out there, the night is a kind of darkness you don't get on land. No streetlights, no headlights, no houses glowing on the horizon. Just a dome of stars overhead and black water stretching forever. Your world shrinks to the deck you're standing on, and the hum of the engines beneath your boots. I was leaning on the rail, fighting sleep, when I spotted it. A light. At first just a pinprick on the horizon. Then it grew brighter, steady, white, rhythmic. Like a lighthouse beam. Except there was no lighthouse marked on the charts in that direction. No island, no shoal, nothing. Just deep water. I told myself it was another vessel. Maybe a trawler. Maybe the Coast Guard. But something about the light made me uneasy. It wasn't moving. It wasn't blinking like a navigation beacon. It was pulsing, slow and deliberate, like a heartbeat. I grabbed the binoculars. Through the lenses, I saw the impossible. There was no ship. No tower. No land. Just a column of light rising straight out of the ocean. It shimmered like a spotlight pointing up from beneath the waves, cutting into the night sky. Around it, the water seemed to boil, though the sea was calm everywhere else. I felt cold crawl up my spine. My first instinct was to call it in, but some primitive corner of my brain screamed don't. If I said it out loud, it would be real. If it was real, then something was out there looking back. So I stood frozen until the light flickered once, twice, then snapped off, leaving only black ocean and a smear of afterimage burning across my vision. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I didn't mention it. Sailors get a reputation fast, and the guy who sees ghosts on the water doesn't last long. But by the second night, when I climbed back on watch, the light was there again. In the same place. This time I wasn't alone. Ray, one of the deckhands, was smoking near the stern. He squinted toward the horizon and muttered, "You see that?" Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. "Yeah." "What the hell is it?" He flicked his cigarette overboard. "Don't know. Don't wanna know." Then he went below deck without another word, leaving me staring at the glow alone. The third night broke me. The light came earlier, stronger, closer. It pulsed with a rhythm that felt deliberate, like it was syncing with my pulse. Against every instinct, I found myself turning the wheel slightly, adjusting our course. Not much. Just enough to angle toward it. The compass needle jittered. As we drew near, I heard something. Not with my ears, but with the bones of my skull. A hum. Low, insistent, like the vibration of a struck tuning fork. It made my teeth ache. I dropped the wheel and stumbled back, hard hammering. And then, God help me, I saw shapes in the light. Figures. Dozens of them. Tall, thin silhouettes moving inside that column like shadows behind frosted glass. They weren't swimming. They weren't floating. They were standing upright, as if there was a floor under them, a room carved into the middle of the ocean. One of them turned, and for the briefest moment I swore its head tilted up toward me. I fell back so hard I bruised my elbow on the deck. When I scrambled up, the light was gone. The sea was empty. The captain chewed me out the next morning for changing course. I didn't tell him why. Ray avoided me. No one else admitted to seeing anything. But on our return trip, as we passed that same stretch of ocean, I stood at the rail with the binoculars. Nothing. Just water and sky. I started to think maybe I'd cracked from exhaustion. Until the last night before landfall. I was half asleep in my bunk when the porthole filled with white. Not moonlight. Not searchlights. That same pulsing beam. It painted the cabin walls like a signal. I sat up, and I swear I heard it humming through the glass. Come back. Come back. Come back. By the time I blinked, it was gone. We made port the next day. I didn't tell a soul. But I still dream about it, about that impossible beacon in the middle of the sea, and the figures waiting inside it like they knew my name. And every time I get assigned to night watch, part of me dreads the horizon. Not because I'm afraid I won't see the light again, but because I'm terrified I will. There's a rule you learn fast when you work the northern shipping routes: don't count the men twice. It sounds ridiculous, like some old superstition, but it isn't a joke. I signed on to a container ship out of Seattle, bound for Anchorage with a skeleton crew of 14. I was new, and that made me the butt of jokes, so when the cook leaned across the galley table and said, "Don't count us twice," I rolled my eyes. "What does that even mean?" I asked. He just shrugged. "You'll see." The first week passed uneventfully. The sea was rough, the air was cold enough to chew through gloves, but nothing unusual. We unloaded in Anchorage, picked up new cargo, and started south again. It wasn't until the second leg of the journey that I noticed something strange. We were eating dinner, 13 of us at the long steel table, one guy on duty in the engine room. I remember looking around the room, listening to the laughter and clatter of forks, when I realized there were 14. A man at the end of the table. Gray hood pulled up, head bent over his plate. I couldn't see his face. Nobody else reacted. They passed him bread, asked him for salt. Treated him like he'd been there the whole time. I blinked, counted again. 14 at the table, one below deck, that made 15. Too many. I opened my mouth to say something, but the cook caught my eye. He shook his head, just once, a tiny warning. So I shut up. The hooded man finished eating without looking up. When he stood, the others shifted to give him space, though none of them seemed to notice. He walked to the door, stepped into the passageway, and was gone. I mean gone. By the time I craned my neck, the corridor was empty. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I tried to bring it up casually to Ray, one of the deckhands. "Hey, is there a 15th crewman?" He gave me a look that made me feel like a child. "Don't count us twice," he muttered, and walked away. The hooded figure came back 3 nights later. This time in the mess hall again, sitting across from me. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible. His plate never seemed to empty, though he made the motions of eating. His hands, what I could see of them, looked wrong. Too long, too pale. Like they'd never seen sunlight. When I glanced around, I realized nobody else was looking at him. Not once. Their gazes skimmed right past him, as if he existed only in the corner of their eyes. Afterward, when he left, I got up too. I followed, keeping my boots soft on the grated floor. He moved slow, steady, down into the lower deck where the cargo containers were strapped. The corridor smelled of oil and salt. My flashlight beam caught rivets and chains. He turned the corner ahead of me, and vanished. I swung the beam back and forth. Nothing. Just cold metal and the hollow thrum of the ship's engines. By the time I got back topside, the cook was waiting. "Don't follow him," he said quietly. "If he wants you, he'll take you. Otherwise, ignore him." I wanted to demand answers. Who was he? How long had this been happening? But the look in the cook's eyes made my throat dry. He wasn't warning me for fun. He was begging me to listen. From then on, I noticed the pattern. The hooded man only appeared when the weather turned foul, when fog rolled in and waves slapped the hull like fists. Always at meals, always at the edge of the crew. He never spoke, never showed his face. Just sat, ate, and left. And each time, I felt his attention on me. Not his eyes, I never saw his eyes, but a weight, like someone pressing their palm against the back of my skull. The worst night came during a storm in the Gulf of Alaska. Wind howled, rain hammered, and the ship groaned like it might tear in half. We huddled in the galley, plates sliding on the table, when he appeared again. 14. One below deck. 15 total. Too many. This time, when he stood, his hood shifted just enough for me to see his face. There was nothing. No features. Just a blur, like wet glass. A suggestion of eyes, a mouth, but not formed. My stomach dropped into ice. He turned that blur toward me, and for one horrible second I thought he would stay. That he would sit down beside me and never leave. But then he walked out, and the crew went on eating, as if nothing had happened. When the storm broke, I cornered the captain. He was a grizzled man, unflappable, the kind you'd trust with your life. I told him what I'd seen. He listened, then said only, "Don't count us twice." I quit after that trip. Didn't sign on again. Some nights I dream of steel tables, of the hooded man lifting his head at last, showing me what lies beneath the blur. And every time I sit in a crowded room I count. Not once. Not twice. Just once, carefully, and then I force myself to stop. Because I'm afraid of what I'll see if I keep going.